This episode of the Mosaic Life Podcast is brought to you by the Mosaic Life Circle. If you're a fan of the podcast, well, first of all, we truly appreciate it, and we appreciate you. You're going to want to sign up for our email list so you can be notified of when brand new episodes and content is published. If you've been listening for a little while, you'll notice that we've expanded past our every Sunday release schedule to include some additional episodes throughout the week. From talks to meditations and other sorts of content, you're going to want to be notified of when that comes out. Additionally, as part of the Mosaic Life Circle, you will be notified of contest announcements, merchandise deals, in-person events, as well as exclusive Instagram television channel releases. If you checked us out last week, you saw Ernie launch the Full Circle Instagram television channel, where he sat down virtually with Lisa Bond, who was our first guest on this podcast. That was episode 11. If you haven't listened to that episode, I will give you a second right now. Go back and listen to it. Come back to me. Good? Cool. He sat down with Lisa to catch up with her and expand on some of the ideas that she talked with us about in that episode. I highly encourage you to check it out at One Mosaic Life on Instagram. And of course, check out the show notes. Click on onemosaic.life, sign up for the circle so you can be notified of contest announcements and new episode releases. Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of the Mosaic Life Podcast. I am personally thrilled to bring this episode to you. Ernie and I have been working hard to develop relationships with people who are inspiring, people who have overcome great odds to get to where they are, or people who help others overcome great odds. And this episode was a unique opportunity for me to join two worlds together. Somebody who is inspirational, but somebody who is from a distant past. Robby Herbst and I went to college together. And as we realized at the beginning of this episode, that has been a decade since either one of us graduated. It makes us feel exceptionally old. It was great catching up with him. And after all of these years, realizing how much we have in common in regard to our passions, our experiences, and how we view the world. Robby and I both worked at our college radio station. That's how we met, Black Squirrel Radio at Kent State University. And we both shared a passion for communication and entertainment and providing value to listeners. Since graduating college, Robby has taken on a life in the marketing world, but he's also become a meditation teacher. He's experimented with his own practice for nearly a decade now, and his experience with meditation has not only changed his life, but inspired him to teach others. And within the last year, he created Tune Inward, which we talk quite a bit about. It's a meditation community focused on making meditation accessible and practical for all. He's passionate about providing his students with guidance to either start up or enhance their very own practice. He also focuses on helping each student build a habit and establish a routine so he or she can consistently experience the benefits of meditation for his or herself. Robby's had a really cool journey, and one of the most incredible things we talk about is his own personal silent retreat, where he closed himself into a cabin of sorts in Michigan and meditated for hours on end. And that's extremely inspirational for me. And it's something that I hope to embark on in the near future. On top of Robby's practice, on top of his silent meditation retreat, we talk a lot about books, which you can hear the smile in my face. I was giddy with excitement. I think I don't have the notes in front of me. I think there's 7 or 8 books in the show notes that we dig into specifically. So check those out. They are all incredible books, either read by Ernie, Robby, or myself. I highly encourage you check out that list. And if you're looking for a little bit of inspiration in your life, pick one and just start reading. On top of all of that, as mentioned, Robby started Tune Inward, his meditation practice for students. We are thrilled to announce a partnership with Robby and Tune Inward, where we are going to be on occasion releasing some of Robby's meditations as content on the Mosaic Life. Starting tomorrow, June 1st, you can check out that very first episode from Robby right here at onemosaic.life on the Mosaic Life podcast. We can't wait. We are so excited. Robby's phenomenal at speaking. He's a phenomenal instructor, and this was a phenomenal interview. Without further ado, please welcome Robby Herbst. Welcome to the Mosaic Life podcast.
Life is an art. Every moment a picture painted in time. The color, texture, lighting, all context. The Mosaic Life vision is to cast a warm glow on your masterpiece, highlighting the struggle while showcasing the culmination of years of hard work.
Join us for guided meditations, interviews with authors and leaders, and engaging conversation as we explore the depths of our consciousness. Robby Herbst, welcome to the podcast, my friend. Robby and I, we went to college together, and as I was just realizing, it's been 10 years since we were at Kent State together, which is, I feel old of many other things. How's it going, man?
It's great. When you say 10 years like that, it makes it seem like a long time, but it hasn't really seemed like 10 years. But,
I know.
So I guess you made me feel a little bit old.
Sorry, misery loves company, I guess. So, but you think about college, and then you go back and think about high school, and I don't even want to have that thought. It's been so long. It's been so long.
Yeah, how strange.
Yeah, even crazier. So,
but you've been doing some exciting things. Let's just jump right in. So you are certified meditation instructor, which I know gets Ernie excited and me excited too. Ernie and I both connected initially over meditation, and we're just excited to talk more about it.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Anything you want to know, happy to talk about it.
I'm curious about your first experience in meditation, because I feel like that's probably the first experience of a lot of people, and hearing it from your mouth, I think, would really help others relate.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think even before then, I was, there's always been something about meditation that has been interesting to me, something that's always drawn me to meditation. And I've never really realized, what that was. I've never really been able to pinpoint it to anything in particular, but these are rooted back in like high school and college days. And I didn't do it then, but I knew I wanted to. But it was actually 2011 when I first decided, okay, I'm going to actually go ahead and give this a shot. So I didn't really know how to do it. I read a little bit about it, and actually right before this session, to master it real quick, like we like to master everything, I just jumped on Google and typed in, how do you meditate? Just to become like a master over the next 5 minutes. And just read very, very briefly how to meditate. And it was this simple concept of breath awareness, which is sitting quietly, closing your eyes, and bringing all of your attention to your breath. And I thought, how hard could this be? So I wanted the mood to be just right. So I rigged up my closet to be all nice and soundproof, and turned off the lights just to basically create a sensory deprivation chamber. I was going to do it right. So I sat cross-legged in the middle of the floor and gave it a whirl. And that's when, probably the second breath in, I started to have thoughts. And it's like, okay, so I have a thought, and then was able to bring my attention back, and it's like, there's another thought, and then another one, and then another one. And then I had different, like a pinch in my back. I had, my legs were going, everything and anything was keeping me from keeping my attention on my breath. And of course, whenever that happens and you can't do something right, that internal voice kicks in and starts to, kick you while you're already down. So it was really just this battle of constant distraction and constant, basically the inability to keep my attention on my breath. So I decided I had enough. I was, a little frustrated and was sitting on the floor cross-legged, wasn't used to that. So I started to stretch a little bit and ended up stretching over my legs. And when I did that, I fell into a very deep sleep. And probably about 20 minutes later, I would say, I woke up and my legs were also completely asleep. So I ended up army crawling basically out of my closet, massaging the feeling into my legs and stumbling out of my room. And I was, confused, and I definitely didn't get the relaxation that I was expecting. So that was my first experience with meditation. And again, that was 2011. And for a little while after that, I wasn't ready to do it again, because I thought, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe, I have thoughts I can't even keep my attention on my breath. So, there's something going on here. But I think that's, and I will touch on this a little bit later, but, that's something that people do face when they start to meditate for the first time, is that, you have thoughts. And the object in meditation is, and we can get into this deeper, but the object of meditation is not to, completely clear your head of all thoughts and be able to just on a whim get rid of all thoughts. It's learning how to change your relationship to that. And it's also recognizing that you have thoughts. It's a totally normal part of having a functioning brain. And there's nothing wrong with that. But there are ways that you can meditate to start to reduce that over time. But that's a little bit further of a step. But, really, from that lesson, had I have known that that was a completely normal experience, I wouldn't have set it down for such a long time after. So that was really my first experience with meditation before I decided to pick it back up again.
It's funny that you talked about the complexity to your first session. Like you got all these, what I imagine was like foam or something, and put it up in your closet, and you have this ideal for what it's going to be, and you made this chamber so that you could meditate in it for the very first time. You'd never even done it, and whether it's that level of complexity or something different, I feel like a lot of people do put a lot of barriers to entry into meditation. So I'm just wondering, since that first meditation, has it gotten simpler? Do you have a more decked out chamber? I imagine I know the answer, but I'm just curious how it's shifted. How simple is your practice? Do you have a very silent room, or can you do this anywhere?
So it's the latter. It's doing it anywhere. I do have a space in my house. So I do have a little cushion. So it's a Zafu and a Zabuton, I believe, are the correct names for it. But it's really just it's a cushion and a pad on the floor. But the reason why I like to do that is because when I really started getting into meditation, I did get that. It was a little bit of a incentive to do it more. I felt that if I would have gotten something, or if that I had got something that was specifically for meditation, that it would encourage me to do it every time that I see it. And it still does every time I see it. So it's in my office right now, actually right behind me. But, I don't have any decked out chambers. That would be cool. But, really the thing about meditation is it's so incredibly accessible. You can do it anywhere. Obviously, you have to be careful. You don't want to close your eyes while you're driving your car. But it is one of those things where you can literally do it anywhere. Like I've had, as long as you feel safe, I would say. So I've had good meditations on a subway before, just sitting down, closing my eyes, and just bringing my attention to my breath. I wasn't doing anything. Nobody could tell. It just looked like I closed my eyes. So it could really be as simple as that. You don't need a lot of the complexities, but some people like that. So it's really your preference. But it's just keeping in mind that you don't have to have all of that stuff. You actually don't need to buy anything specifically for meditation. You don't need incense. You don't need healing crystals. You don't need any specific robes. But early in the morning, if you're in a bathrobe, that can be actually pretty comfortable. So
I like that. I love the notion that you can meditate anywhere. And it reminds me of a story Ernie told me, and maybe this is still something you actively do, Ernie, but you told me how you would, correct me if I'm wrong, you would meditate at work in your break room in front of others. And to me, it's difficult for me to get over that fear of being seen doing it, which I know is in essence a silly fear. But Ernie, is that still something you do? I mean, do you have that comfortability where you can just sit there, and even if you're surrounded by coworkers, just find that space of mindfulness?
It's something that I do, not intentionally, like, oh, I'm going to meditate in the middle of all these people, but typically I'm doing it at work and somebody might walk in and it's not comfortable. And I think that's really why I continue doing it when somebody comes in, because that's when, the thoughts of, oh, what do they think about me? Oh my gosh, are they trying to be more quiet? Do they think I'm ridiculous? I wonder if they think I'm cool, or, just all these not dumb thoughts, but just these random thoughts that I didn't choose to come up. That's when they start bubbling up. So that I still do it. But by no means would I say that I'm comfortable with it. It's probably one of my better practices at this point, or more important practices.
I mean, and it's a great practice. We preach getting comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I can't think of a better practice than that, especially when it involves interpersonal communication with others or lack thereof, and really honing the practice of your mindfulness and retaining that presence of mind. I mean,
Totally.
Robby,
Yeah.
do you, I mean, aside from on the subway, you personally host meditation classes, which I do want to dig into, but I mean, personally speaking, can you just sit down in a busy park and just, start meditating?
Yeah. And usually, I try to set aside time in my day to meditate. And it's usually, and we can talk about this, but it's usually first thing in the morning during the quiet hours of the morning. So that way I know I'll get my practice in. But if it is somewhere public, if I'm, feeling up for it and want to just go ahead and close my eyes and bring my attention to my breath, there are also mindfulness breathing exercises that you can do with your eyes open. So, you can do it in a way that nobody even knows that you're doing it. You don't have to sit, cross-legged every time with your fingers coiled on your lap, in mudras or those different hand gestures. You can really just sit with your hands on your lap. You can fix your gaze on a point just right in front of you, and you can look like you're meditating. Or if you're super self-conscious about it, you can, hold a book open in front of you and cast your eyes down on your book, and it looks like you're reading, but you're meditating. So there are lots of different things that you could do if you do feel a little self-conscious about it. But that is also an interesting point of listening to, that inner voice of, what are you saying to yourself? Like, how are you dealing with that right now? And all that, in paying attention to that rumination and seeing, oh, there's quite a bit going on here. And maybe that's something that I need to note, should I not be as self-conscious? This is not really that big of a deal. So it's almost just looking and listening to what's going on in the moment.
Yeah. And now you meditating at work, Robby, that's not actually foreign at all for you, because you host, you lead like a course in your workplace. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in the marketing industry, in the agency world for a little over 10 years now. And where I work now, the co-founder of the company, we got on the subject of talking about meditation. And actually when I started there is about when I was getting my certification. And we talked about that and thought it'd be cool sometime to do some sort of workplace program. And then it ended up happening. It ended up, they were 100% open and on board to creating a meditation program. So that's something that I've been doing for, I think, over the last year, actually a little bit more than that. So I gave a couple of talks on meditation, a couple of, threw out a lot of the benefits of it, and approached it in a way And that's one thing that I really like to do about meditation in my approach, is that I like to take a very practical and an accessible approach, to put it in real terms, because there's a lot of baggage that people have, or misconceptions that people have about meditation. So I really wanted to carefully approach this in the way that I approach meditation. So I just made it very straightforward, very almost science-based, and touted the positive benefits of it, not hitting the spiritual angle or anything like that at all. And started leading some meditations. And I started once a month, and we did that for about 4 or 5 months of just a single class. But this year, especially since everything that's been going on with COVID and being at home and people being, a little bit more stressed in general, that has kicked up. And now there is a meditation Monday, every Monday. So via Zoom, I'll lead a Monday morning meditation. And then there's still a monthly meditation, which goes into a very specific practice in a much more detailed form. The Monday meditations are real short, probably about 10 or 15-minute meditations. But then there's like an hour class as well. So really a cool way to get people exposure to meditation and also get some meditation time in at work.
How many converts have you gotten at work? How many people have you turned on to meditation who have a solid foundational practice right now?
So we had, it's a relatively small agency, but the initial sign up, I think it was about 70% who wanted to try it out. And of course, numbers don't dwindle over time. Of course, sure. You have lots of meetings and work-related things that come up. So it's pretty steady. But to me, it really doesn't matter, how many people are in the class. I really, even if I had one person in the class, it's creating a time. It's creating that space to learn something new, to kick off some stress, and to do it together. Like there's a big difference in meditating with other people versus meditating on your own. It can be a really cool, experience. So I don't know. I've been super happy with the turnout, and it's also really cool to get feedback. I'll pop into a meeting, and someone the other day was like, I wasn't able to sleep the other night. And then I'm not sure if I was supposed to do this or not, but tapped into the one meditation technique that we just learned, and I was able to fall asleep. And then a couple of weeks ago, there was another woman who I worked with, and she said that her son has been having her 12-year-old son has been having a difficult time. So she taught him the technique that I did, and it helped him to settle down quite a bit. So it's really cool to hear those types of things of it, not just being at work, but actually starting to come into home, because, everybody in the workplace in some level experiences stress. And there's a lot of statistics out there about workplace stress and how that can really impact you. So really that was one of the reasons why this program was created, because in the marketing world, it's pretty fast paced. It can be very stressful. I've seen people lose it essentially. So it's one of those things where, once you start to get into it, it can really help from that. So it improves the morale of employees. It can help reduce stress, improve focus, attention, all of those things that can really have a positive impact on a business.
That's amazing.
It really is. And the feedback you got I imagine would feel really good, just knowing that the work that you've cultivated for yourself, to hear that it helps people sleep, which can be really, really challenging for some people, for a lot of people. And then also that it helped another person connect to their 12-year-old child and help that child as well. It's really incredible feedback. And, another point you made was the difference between meditating alone versus meditating as a group. And that's really something I was interested about hearing your take on coming into this conversation, because you're doing it in your workplace. So you're leading these groups, and then you're working in the same place with some of these people. Sure. And I wonder if you notice or feel or sense dynamic shifts for those people that do come to the meditation group and then move back into the workday.
Sure. It's so subtle, and going back to your desk after doing something like that, you don't really get to pay too much attention to people's demeanor throughout the day. But So that's where there are some check-ins. So we'll have like a Slack channel that we can talk about, ask questions and different things like that, which should probably be a little bit better about doing that. But, there have been a couple of times in the past where it's been, we've done this for so long now. Does anybody have any feedback on how this is impacting you? And some people say that they are better able to take a step back from their thoughts versus constantly wrestling with them. So even those little wins and stuff like that is really gratifying to hear. And it's usually after the fact. But, I think one of the tricky things about meditation, and it's also the tricky thing about anything, it's with, it's with exercise, it's with a diet, it's consistently doing it and remembering to consistently do it. So there's a lot of challenges that come with that. So that comes, down to people's willingness to continue on that practice. Some people just like to have a little section of the day where they do that, and then they don't meditate for, until the next class. But some people like to challenge themselves to carry it on. So I think from a communication standpoint, when I can definitely tell there's been a shift in the acceptance of it. Talking about it before, you can tell that people, it's something, I think probably because it's more spiritual in background, that it can kind of make people uncomfortable. But after having the conversations, after putting it out there and actually practicing it, I've noticed that people are much more willing and open to talk about it out loud, as if it's just something, common.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I really think that we've seen a big shift in that commonality and it being a part of our dialogue over the last 10 years or so. But I do want to go back because you mentioned the word consistency, and that's the magic word. And it's something that I have struggled with and do continue to struggle with, because I have the best of intentions every single day to sit down for 20 minutes and generally do an unguided meditation. But working from home or working for myself, I often find myself working on project after project and then just going into the next one and carving out that time. Even if I put it on the calendar, it doesn't always happen. So I'm curious, do you have, expert advice for how to really make your practice consistent? Is there, I don't want to ask you if there's a life hack to make it happen, but what's your best advice for somebody who doesn't make the time to do it, even though they love doing it and they get a lot of benefit from it?
Yeah, and a caveat too, just for anyone listening. So Robby, as you'll probably hear in the, I just interrupted you to tell you something that you might state in the intro, but I wanted to just speak about Tune Inward and how Robby works with people to do this, to habituate the practice of meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that is honestly one of the biggest challenges that I hear is either not having enough time to meditate or remembering to meditate. So this is where a little bit of self-discipline kicks in. One of the things, and I like how you mentioned the word hack. A lot of people want to know hacks to become better meditators or master meditation, because we like to do that with everything. We like to become an expert in something, master it, and move on to the next thing. But meditation, I would say the hack is using a teacher. The hack is working with somebody to develop your skill over time. And I think when it comes to finding time to meditate, there's a number of things that you can do, and everybody's different. One of the first pieces of advice that I would have is not think about how long should I meditate. And I think a lot of that can be a barrier for somebody. And I'll get asked that often, is how much or how long is a good session? How long should I be meditating? And you can find this answer anywhere. And you can also find different answers anywhere. So it really just depends on the source that you're looking for. But I would say the most common that I hear is 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening, which if you meditate, it doesn't seem like a lot. But if you don't have that time set aside, if somebody is interested in trying out meditation for the first time and they come up to me and if I gave them that answer, they would be like, wow, that is way too much time. So I would say from that aspect is try not to think about how long you should meditate. Try to think about ways that you can start to build a habit so that you show up to meditate every time. So this is, and I think one of the books that I've read in the past is called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Love it. I love that book, man.
Yeah, it's so good. And one of my favorite one of the pieces, I mean, there's so much I need to go back and read it because there's just so much in there about habit formation, and there's a lot of really great, there's so much great information in there. And I think he's actually an Ohio guy too, which is cool. But he has something that he mentions in the book is I don't know if he calls it this verbatim, but it's basically a 2-minute rule. And if you're trying to create a habit for the first time, if you're trying to do something for the first time, just set aside 2 minutes to do it. Just set aside 2 minutes to show up. So if you're meditating, maybe the first minute is setting up your place, then you sit down for a minute, and then you get up, and that's it. That's all you do. You hit that 2-minute point, and then you stop. Or if you're feeling ambitious, you can do the 3-minute rule. So with that what that starts to do, if you did that every morning, that would start to train you to get into the habit. And I think one of the examples that he uses, unless I'm totally misremembering the book, is putting on if you want to get into the habit of going for a jog, you put on your running shoes.
Yes.
Maybe you walk out the door, you lock the door, you take a few steps off the porch. That's 2 minutes, and then you're back. He also worked with somebody who, he told him to go to the gym for just 2 minutes. He went to the gym for 2 minutes and then stopped. And after a while, once you start to get into the habit of showing up to do the work, that is the biggest, that's one of the biggest hurdles, is just starting to do it, to set aside time to show up to do the work. Once you're there, you can do it. And then after you've started to master that habit formation of showing up, then you can start gradually adding time. So I would just say that my first tip would just be, don't worry about how long to meditate. Worry about just showing up to do the work. And once you start to get into the habit of doing that, then you will gradually increase your time and become a lot more comfortable. And it will go from feeling like something you have to do to something that you want to do. Something that you get to do, even. Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
And that, to kind of add to that, there is a podcaster and entrepreneur I like, Noah Kagan. He may not have thought of this, but he used a term called happiness triggers, which can in essence be turned into any sort of habit trigger. Whereas he inspired me to get vanity plates, because every time I see them, it makes me smile. So you do things, you set yourself up for success because it causes you to do things that better yourself. So if you're putting out your running shoes in front of the front door every day, that triggers you, oh, I should go run. It makes the barrier to entry that much less. And so if you have your meditation cushion, or if you have something that triggers you to get into that place of mindfulness, it just makes it that much easier to sit down for 2 minutes or 20 minutes. Just removing those barriers just helps you build that consistency.
Yeah, no, that is a great point. And that's another one I wanted to touch on was, and I think James Clear talks about this as well as his book, is it's the point is to make it visible. So I think one of the examples which you pretty much nailed was putting, like, if you want to work out in the morning, put out your workout clothes for the night before. So that way you wake up, you see them, you know what you have to do.
Absolutely.
You're putting in some preparation. You're putting in taking a couple minutes to set it up so that you can see it, and then you know you can do it. Or you can set something on your kitchen table, something where it's visible in your environment. So you see a randomly placed object and say, oh, that's to remind me to do this. That is a great tip.
In regard to mornings and setting yourself up for success throughout the day, you briefly touched on your morning routine, Robby. What else do you make sure that you do every single day so you are on a path to, I guess, take advantage of the next 12 to 16 hours?
Absolutely. So I think, for me personally, the morning routine has been the most important part of my day. And whenever I try to think about my morning routine over the past couple of years, because it's something that has been constantly evolving, and it's something that continues to evolve, because you can feel a little, if you have a morning routine that is just this, then this, then this, then this, over time, you need a little bit of variety. But I try to incorporate some of the same things into my routine so that it reduces any uncertainty of what I'm going to do, but I like to keep things open. So I would say that my ideal routine, and this goes for the weekend as well, the weekend is sometimes a little more loose, but I try to make sure that I'm out of bed between 4 and 5 in the morning. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of time between 4 and 5 and when you actually start your day. So go to work or start to get the family ready or whatever, whenever the busyness of your morning kicks in, there's a lot of time to do some work between that, from when you wake up to when you start to actually get started. I would say that my wife and I, a couple years ago, we started using an actual alarm clock. So we don't use our phones, or I don't use my phone to set an alarm. So because what I would realize in the past was that I would pick up my phone, I would hit snooze. I would pick up my phone. So really my first action of the day was procrastinating the day. So that really sets the tone for the rest of the day, you can only imagine. So that eliminated that option. So it's an alarm clock that once it starts to come on, it basically mimics a 30-second sunrise. So it gradually brightens up your room. So it doesn't jar you out of your sleep. The light is supposed to catch you when you're in a very light state of sleep so that you come out of it, not feeling so jarred, basically out of a deep sleep. And then I don't look at my phone until 7 in the morning, just because I don't want any screen time between when I wake up and when I'm actually doing work. So when I wake up, I'll typically exercise for about a half hour. So that's some sort of movement, some sort of weightlifting or a jog or something like that. And then it's shower after that, which lately I've been incorporating cold showers into my routine.
Nice.
Which I can honestly say that, and Ernie and I talked about this a little bit, even if I don't feel like I want to do it, or I guess I should say, especially if I don't feel like doing it at all, I know I'm going to feel amazing after it. Absolutely. Even more so.
Absolutely.
And it's really crazy what that can do. So usually a 2-minute cold shower to end it. And then either eating after that or meditating after that for 20 minutes. And then usually some sort of writing exercise. So if that's sitting down to write a single thing I'm thankful for the day, and then a single intention. And that's an important part for me, because you read articles and about the impact and the positive outcomes of expressing gratitude. And you'll see articles that are, write 5 to 10 things that you're thankful for every day. I started doing that and then realized that I was quickly running out of things, and I started feeling bad, because that's a lot to write when you do it every day. So I narrowed it down to one thing so that I could really think about what I'm thankful for. And sometimes it's serious, sometimes it's not so serious and more fun. But then I would say that the next important part after that is my intention. So I'll write out an intention. So today I intend to blank, and then I'll put a checkbox next to it. So then that way, at the end of the day, when I come back, I can either affirm or confirm that I didn't live up to that intention for the day, and then do a quick little reflection on that. So it's something that ties the morning and the evening together. And then if I have time, I'll read or just spend time with my wife and our dogs.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's funny, just sitting in the silence here, little podcast meditation. Man, I wonder what your experience of consciousness how it has shifted since becoming a meditation instructor, or just since, let's say, deepening your practice. So maybe stepping up to 20 minutes, or maybe sometimes you even go longer than that. What's your experience of the world and consciousness as you do that, as you deepen in that way?
Yeah. So, I mean, I can say that the reason why I stuck with it is because I was starting to notice shifts. I was starting to notice changes in my behavior and the way that I was dealing with stress and anxiety, the way that I was learning to tap into the relationship with myself, which is something that I realized early on needed quite a bit of work. And I realized that if I wanted to start to improve relationships around me, I really had to start with myself, because otherwise I would feel like I was drawing from a depleted reserve of trying to give something to other people that I don't even have for myself.
Yeah.
So, I would say, just as my practice has deepened, it's the biggest thing for meditation for me is just how it spills over into life. And it's not just what happens during practice. And that's really when it started getting interested in for me, because I just realized I was better able to focus. I was able to be more present in the moment. So my overall awareness and perception was more in tune with what was going on. Not perfectly. We're all human. We still lose it from time to time. But maybe you're more aware that you're losing it, I guess. I would say that it helped me to be, and it continues to help me be more energized. And I would say, a lot of what meditation does is and this is the really cool part about it today, and maybe one of the reasons why people are getting more interested in it, is because there's a lot of science that's going into it. There's a lot of science behind it now that shows the impact of long-term meditation on different regions of your brain, of strengthening your brain, of strengthening brains of people who go through intensive programs who've never meditated before. So, when we really think about it, we all know that exercise is really important for us. We all know that it's good for our body. It gets our blood flowing. It usually, whenever we start to meditate, we start to make better decisions, some of us, about what we choose to eat. But I've noticed, by working from a meditation standpoint, our brain is responsible for every single action that we take and every decision that we make. And if we're walking around with a clouded brain, basically, that's going to impact our decision making. That's going to impact the choices that we make on a daily basis. But if you set aside time to take care of that, if you set aside time to, clear some of that, blow off some steam, do some different sorts of meditations, it can really help you with your decision making. It can help you make better decisions. And for me, that has been in movement, that has been in diet and what I eat and what I don't eat, and led me to not drink, which I wasn't really a big drinker to begin with, but I realized I don't really do this that much. Don't really like it. Okay, cool. Don't have to do it. So, I really feel like it just opens the doors for so many possibilities. And it's amazing that even if you set aside just a few minutes a day to do this, if you do it consistently and start to go deeper into your practice, it starts to, you take little bits of it with you into your day.
Robby,
yeah, that's really well said.
Yeah, absolutely. You're in Columbus, right, Robby?
Yeah, I'm in Westerville.
Why the hell have we not hung out in the last 10 years? Like everything you just described, I embarked on a year-long sobriety goal last October. So it's been about 7 months I had a drink, and I'm so much more productive. I feel so much better about myself having not worried about how I'm going to feel the next day or what I'm going to do that evening. It's so much better.
Yeah. And I think, and that's, first of all, that's amazing. I'm super happy for you. That's really cool to hear. And I can only imagine that you do feel that, you feel that way, because you start to be more in tune with, if I do this tonight, I'm going to feel like this tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or I could not. And then feel great the next day. And it's really just that simple decision of that split in the moment decision. And I used to be pretty self-conscious, and, again, I don't really consider myself to be a drinker, but It's just something that I never fully enjoyed. But another thing that I realized in doing that is I got over that self-conscious behavior, or that self-conscious thought that I had of, if I'm out with coworkers, or if I'm out with friends and not drinking, and people are like, why aren't you drinking? Like, I just don't, because I was always on the fence, it was a little awkward. But once I decided I'm just not going to do that, I was able to have a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Honestly.
It's so much easier to shut the conversation down when you have conviction behind yourself. Whereas if you're suggestible, then, oh, one drink won't kill me. And then 5 drinks later, you're on the floor and you feel terrible the next day.
Exactly.
But I digress.
He is, or you are, Trey?
Me. Absolutely.
I don't know if I could even do 5, man. So,
Anyway.
So I want to talk a bit about your experimenting with meditation and some of the ways that you've moved that practice forward in your life. And one thing you mentioned in our conversation, Robby, was your silent retreat. I'd love for you to dive into that.
Yeah, that was 2014. So this was after. So I talked a little bit about I talked a lot about my first experience in 2011. But I knew there was something about it that I was still drawn to. So I started doing it more and started to fall into a rhythm of realizing how it was helping with stress and anxiety. And I reached this point where there were certain relationships in my life that were not going well. And I know I wasn't helping that situation because I was also just very unhappy. And I ended up canceling a trip. And I'm not what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not the type of person who does things sporadically. I really like to think about things, but I realized that I needed to shift something. Something needed to happen. I need to take a little bit of a drastic action. So I had heard about meditation retreats, never gone on one, still haven't gone on an official retreat, but I thought, yeah, I want to do that, and didn't know what to do. So I did some quick researching, again, Google being there for helping me with my meditative practice at the time. So I researched those types of retreats, and I was like, okay, that's what I want to do. But I only had 2 or 3 weeks to plan it because I still had that time off. So I laid out a retreat. I laid out a 3.5 day, really intensive retreat that was meditating from 5:30 in the morning to 10 at night, with alternating sessions of walking and seated meditations, a couple things of yoga here and there, some writing exercises, some breathing exercises, or some reading exercises. So, and I was also going to be conducting it silently, which I never realized how much I can talk to myself when I'm alone. So, but I decided to do that, and it's an experience that changed my life. And I actually read through last night some of the writings that I did during that, and I'm planning on writing about the experience in its entirety. But I would say each day was probably about 9.5 hours of just straight meditation. And the longest that I had meditated prior to that was maybe an hour, but most of my sessions were 20 minutes. So it was like training for a marathon, only skipping the training and just doing the marathon. So I did it. And the first day, I'll just run briefly through some of the highlights or things that I came out with. The first day, it was probably the second or third meditation. And I realized that I had so many thoughts. I had so much chatter going on, and it started to turn negative. It started to be like, you're here, you've taken this time off, you're alone, the beach is right outside. It's an absolutely beautiful day. Why, what the hell are you doing here? Why are you doing this? You're not gonna be able to do the full thing. And all of a sudden this thought popped into my head that was, I am my biggest obstacle. I had no idea where it came from. But once that popped into my head, everything went quiet. And it was just like, wow, saying that out loud, it doesn't sound as profound, but whenever you I would say there's a difference in reading about something or hearing about something and then actually experiencing something, and especially if it comes out of nowhere. So that experience just drastically shifted the rest of my time there. I would say it was just very simple. Day 2 was trying not to fall asleep the whole time. It was very, very difficult. And I brought 2 books with me because I've read I read about during silent retreats that there's usually a teacher who gives some sort of talk at the end of the day or gives some sort of advice, or has little office hours to check in on you. I didn't really have access to that. So I brought 2 books. I brought Real Happiness, The Power of Meditation by Sharon Salzberg, which is, I recommend it from a new meditator standpoint. I think she's a Buddhist psychologist, but also an amazing teacher. And just the concepts, I don't consider myself to be a Buddhist, but in a lot of books about meditation are from Buddhist teachers. Right. But the simplicity of the writing and all of the concepts are universal. You don't have to be that to be able to meditate. So that was one book. And I read, I was like, okay, what does she say about, falling asleep during meditation? The first tip was splashing some cold water on your face. So I started to do that, and then that helped. But another interesting tip, and I totally forgot about this until I actually read back through my notes. One of them was paying attention to your breathing patterns whenever you start to feel sleepy, and see how those change, so that once you become aware of how your breathing patterns change, you can catch it and not fall asleep. And that's actually something that apparently worked. When I was reading back through, I know it's something I totally forgot about, but I paid attention to my breathing. And once I started to get into a state where I was about to fall asleep, my breathing pattern started to change. It actually stopped after my exhale for like 2 or 3 seconds and then kicked back in. And I noticed whenever that happened, I would start to get sleepy. So I would be very conscious about my transition from exhaling to inhaling. So a very subtle detail, but that helped me do that. And then the third day, I got a little bit more free with my walking meditations and did it outside. And I did this at my family's place in Michigan. We've got a place in Western Michigan, which is one of the most beautiful places in the world for me, honestly. And I was just walking outside and came across a lot of really cool nature things that I haven't seen before. Like I saw my first bald eagle in person. And I saw, I took a kayak out and saw this mom deer leading her 2 does like across the river. And it was just these little tiny moments of just this deep appreciation for just nature and being outside and being isolated and just enjoying all of this beauty, not through the screen of a phone, but experiencing it and just tapping into an actual moment. And that day is like one of the first days that I could remember in a while that I just felt this true deep sense of happiness. And, those were the 3 days. And then I started to taper out of it after that experience. But, when I left that retreat, it didn't, at the time, nothing was, fixed, but it showed me what I needed to work on. One of that was the relationship with myself, and how the relationship with myself needed to be improved before I could, improve that with other people. And that was also the time when I decided that I wanted to teach. I just had that desire to teach. I just felt somewhere deep down that this is something that I someday want to do.
And that's inspiring. It's a great story too. Just the arc of time over 3 days, from like, what the hell am I doing here, to, oh, I'm creating my own obstacle here. And then to, complete relaxation in the form of, passing out for a day, and then just being at peace with, or feeling connected to nature, in a more powerful way. That's great, man.
Robby, did you mention the second book? The first one was Real Happiness. You mentioned you brought 2 with you.
So that's what I was about to dive into next, cool. or just touch on next, because the next day I started reading An Open Heart by the Dalai Lama. It was just the other book that I had, and I thought this might be inspire me. And actually, on the fourth day after I started having those types of experiences, I just picked it up, and one of the first things that I read was this quote that I wrote down because it really summed up the experience that I was going through. And the quote was, "In general, the difficult periods of life provide the best opportunities to gain useful experiences and develop inner strength." So since I was going through that difficult period in life, I mean, this was an opportunity for me that I could not pass up. And it was definitely useful, and it definitely helped start to basically sow or plant the seeds of growing and just coming out of whatever I was going through and marching forward in with a completely different perspective.
That's so cool. That really is. I've been wanting personally to go on a retreat myself, and doing so by yourself it sounds inspiring. But I do want to turn that. So that led you down the road, which eventually got you to becoming meditation certified and teaching and developing Tune Inward. Can you talk more about that, especially Tune Inward and what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Tune Inward is something that I've been working on for quite a while now. I admittedly am a perfectionist. I've learned to let up the reins on that a little bit, but it's still there. That's something that's hardwired. That's something that I'm working on. But the idea of Tune Inward has just been something that's been evolving since I earned my teacher certification. So I earned my teacher certification in 2017. And then in 2018, I was actually asked by the instructor to basically serve as the TA for the next round of students. So that was kind of cool, working with students from all around the world to help them earn their certification. So that was a lot of 2018. In 2019, I really just spent continuing to practice, continuing to deepen what I learned in both courses, and started to create Tune Inward, which is this concept that I've had of making meditation practical and accessible for everybody. And a lot of this has come out of my past experience with meditation and some of the roadblocks that I faced based on misperceptions. One of them being that it's this crazy spiritual thing that you have to be, a Buddhist or a monk to do, or, those types of misconceptions. And once I was able to look past that, once I was able to get over some of those hurdles, I realized, it's not this at all. And this is something that's really powerful. And it's kind of like exercising. It's kind of like exercise for your mind. And I overheard somewhere, I really wish I would have known the source of this, but it was exercise or meditation tones the mind like exercise tones the body. And once I heard that, I just really started thinking more about how people approach meditation, how I want to approach meditation, the types of people I want to teach, which is everybody. But I do know that there are quite a few people out there who could really benefit from it, who maybe have their back turned towards it. And those are probably some of the hardest people to reach, because you can't just influence somebody to do something. Usually if you tout something, they'll turn away from it or build up more of a resistance to it. But I wanted to create Tune Inward as a way to teach, as a way to be open to people who want to learn how to meditate or learn, a different type of meditation, or to deepen their practice. So it's really been this very long forming community that I've been, or the concept, I would say, of this community of just very accessible and practical meditation. And just connecting with people, helping people tune into what's going on with them, their thoughts, their feelings, their emotions, all of that stuff, and shift that perspective to live happier and more authentic feeling lives.
A solid, man. Practical is like the name of the game, especially for people coming in, and emotional awareness. I feel like that's really important. It's not something they're really teaching in schools. It's not something that can be passed down unless it's been cultivated in somebody's life. So a lot of people are missing out on that. I wonder for you, what are some of your habitual emotions that kind of come in and rev you up, and what are some ways when you like notice yourself getting wrapped up, you're like, oh, look, I'm getting angry, or I'm getting sad, or I'm getting frustrated again. Okay. And then what do you do in that moment when you notice those things are happening?
So that's a great question. And I would say when it comes to, so are you talking about like a moment starting to get heated, and how do you keep from exploding, basically?
Exploding or
Yeah.
breaking down, or whatever
Sure.
it is, because we've got to be our own meditation teacher, whether or
Right.
not you're certified or not. We've got to be able to call ourselves out of that, oh, this is happening, and moving ourselves through it. So I'm wondering your process.
Sure. And that's something that, you hope you don't face often. So that's why you practice it. You practice, when you are uh, keeping your attention, depending on the meditation style that you do. I mean, there's lots of different types of meditations, but let's focus on something like, a thought comes into your head during meditation, and it's this ruminating thought. And the more that you practice meditation, the more that you learn how to take a step back, how to observe whatever that is. And you know that you're in a safe environment. Like when you're meditating, you're not right in the middle of a heated discussion. That would probably not, be helpful for you if you were in a heated discussion and you sat down and closed off the other person. That might lead to some more conflict. But when you sit to meditate, you are in a safe environment. You are in a non-confrontational environment. You are in a calm, relatively, environment. So you learn to sit with those types of things. You learn to take a step back from those types of things and start to shift your perspective. And it can be hard to explain an experience, but there is an experience that as you get used to doing this, and I'll say it doesn't happen all the time. And, you can still lose yourself a little bit. Nobody's perfect. Everybody's human. We have strong emotions, and depending on what our day's looking like, or what circumstances or situations are happening in our life, like if there's a bunch of loss, if there's a bunch of, and I think that comes to a universal empathy or compassion for other people who are freaking out. You realize maybe you don't know their full story. You don't know what's going on there. But whenever there's a heated moment, whenever there's something happening, and if you're able to apply your practice, and sometimes it just habitually kicks in, you realize that you have a choice. And it's this split-second choice of, I could lose my mind right now, or is it worth getting worked up over? And I don't know really the best way to describe that experience, but if you've had it before, it's almost like this little switch flicks on, like, oh, and then you're totally in the moment. You're totally grounded in where you are, and not to lose yourself, because whenever you lose yourself, your thinking becomes obstructed. Your words just start flying out before your your mind can catch up to them. But when you practice that, it's almost like a firefighter practicing for an actual a moment that involves fire, a moment that involves a lot of panic. There's a lot of practice time, and you're usually practiced in a controlled environment, and you hope that nothing drastic happens. But what meditation does is whenever you do start to face those types of experiences, you can go in better prepared.
Yeah. I love how meditation can, the more you meditate or the more you continue to meditate, not necessarily more time, like 40 minutes compared to 20 minutes, but continuing the practice, and then going into life, how you start to notice the arc of, let's just say, conflict. I think that's a really good word to use in this instance. You start to see the arc of conflict, and maybe the first time you're almost to the peak before you realize that you are attached to something that's not helping, and then the next time you come back in and you're only halfway up the hill when you realize, oh, I'm starting to get up there. And then, you just move yourself on down the hill each time as you move back into your practice and then back into the world.
Sure. Yeah, and one thing and another thing I would say that meditation does is a lot of people think that when you start to meditate, when you start to develop a meditation practice, there's a little bit of a fear that you'll lose your edge. There's a little bit of a fear that you'll lose things that you feel give you an upper hand. But when you are able to control your temperament, when you're able to control your mood, or when you're able to control yourself in a heated situation, that gives you an ultimate edge that is really difficult to have if you don't work on it.
100% of the time.
It can do wonders there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I couldn't agree more with that. As a kid, I played baseball, I played golf, I had coaches growing up, and that was the mentality. You've got a coach when you want to do something better. When I went into business for myself, I was introduced to business coaching. I realized that coaches existed outside of the sports arena. And this is the same scenario. If you want to be able to access more of your mind, if you want to be able to control your temperament better, I don't want anybody to ever feel like there's shame in having a coach for any sort of aspect in their life where they want to improve upon. And so what would you recommend for somebody who's struggling to make the time to meditate, or struggling to find the mindfulness that they're looking for, and developing that relationship with that coach? Where does somebody start?
I would say that to look past the idea that a coach is something negative. If people do feel that way, because I mean, look at some of the greatest athletes in the world. They all have coaches.
Absolutely.
They need that coach, and like a professional basketball coach, they're not going to be better than the actual player, but they have different tools. They have different skill sets that can just continue to enhance and improve that edge of that player. That's really why they're there. I would say for somebody who is looking to get more into meditation, and maybe you're not at the point yet where you need a coach, and I think coach is a good word. From a teaching standpoint, that's what a teacher is. A teacher is there to essentially coach you. A teacher is there to challenge you, to provide guidance, to answer questions, to help you move along, and to build the right skills and know the right things to do, and the subtle little minute changes that can have drastic impacts. So, I'd say if you're not ready for a teacher, if you're feeling a little bit hesitant about working with somebody to meditate. So if you're hesitant about working with a meditation teacher, the first thing you have to do is you just have to try it out. But I would caveat that a little bit by saying I would try it out, but give it a full, honest attempt. And that's a little bit tricky because they could say, oh, I did, 3 times and it's not for me, and write it off. And that's what a lot of people tend to do. But I would really think about your approach to meditation. And if you don't know where to start, that might be a sign that you might need to talk to somebody about it, or ask them something about it, or ask them, how to get started in a simple conversation. But there are, as you guys know, there are so many apps out there that offer free guided meditations out there. I will say that there's some good to those apps, that they're obviously free, but I would say that some of the negatives is that you do miss a little bit of that human interaction. You do miss that ability to ask questions. And I think back to my first time when I started to meditate, and I had all those thoughts and I was being distracted and I couldn't keep my attention on my breath. If I would have just had somebody there to say, this is normal. Like, this is like, all you have to do with what you're doing is you just bring your attention back to your breath. You'll have a distraction. Your mind will wander. Bring it back. As long as you bring your attention back, that's what it does. Your mind wanders. That's what it does. If I would have had somebody to tell me that, I would have then been able to be like, oh, this is normal. And then I would have worked with it for, I would have kept going probably sooner than I did. But, I would say you have to try it out, and you have to, because otherwise you're not going to get that experience. But I really think working with somebody to coach you there, if you're looking for the hack of meditation, if you're looking for ways to jump right into a practice, working with somebody who can be there to talk to you, to answer your questions, to coach you, is one of the best ways that you can do that. And that might take a little bit of vulnerability to talk to somebody, but more and more people are opening up to these types of experiences. I would say even now, because of what we're going through, and people being stressed, people being overwhelmed, people pushed to look more inward, to spend more time in silence, even though we have our phones to distract us.
Yeah.
But
what's the next piece for you? I'm interested to know, like, a lot of people that listen to this, they might be ready to start, and this might be the episode they hear and they're like, okay, this really feels more familiar. I've heard a lot about meditation and now I'm ready to start. And they start. And then other people listening to this, they might have a practice and they might be, moving through life with a daily practice or a 4 times a week practice. And so I'm just looking at the next evolution of it for you. What are you discovering right now in meditation, and maybe what's the leading edge of your experimenting with it?
That's a good question. And the reason why I say it like that, and I'm a little hesitant to answer, is because, as I've been rolling along with at least building out Tune Inward on my own, it's been something that I've really tried to let go of, and this is something that I've also been taught in meditation, is to let go of expectations, to let experiences unfold on their own. And, if I'm trying different things out, and right now I'm in the experimental phase of continuing to build Tune Inward, of continuing to teach. And that's through virtual classes, which obviously all classes now are virtual just because we can't really see each other.
Yeah.
And just, it's really, for my evolution of what's next, it's going to be continuing to make things more accessible, continuing to reach people. So if somebody can't make it to a recorded class, have some downloads available. And the reason why I say downloads, which sounds a little old school, I've thought about the idea of an app. I've thought about that, but there's so many apps out there right now. And there's something a little bit for me in learning meditation from an app, is that it can give you that, few minutes of clarity. It can give you that few minutes of calm. But once you end your session and you see all your notifications pop up, it starts to trigger the dopamine. Right. It starts to trigger the cortisol. It's basically using something that can very easily stress you out to calm you down. And there's a very crazy boundary there that's easy to slip over, and destroy your session afterwards.
Yeah. I never thought I would see the day or see the day where I would hear somebody say downloads sounds old school.
Me either.
But it's really true. Yeah.
But, and if that's, I don't know if that's the right way to go, but it's something that I just feel like, for me personally, a huge struggle from an attention standpoint has been my phone. By far and away.
Absolutely.
And now there's more studies out there on what our phones do to us. And they're super interesting, but what they do to our attention span, how they fragment our attention span, how they make us uneasy, how they make us stressed. And, and how attractive they are also. They're like little slot machines in our pocket that are designed to keep our attention. And meditation breaks a lot of that dependency of, if you're standing in a line, you don't fumble to reach for your phone. So that's where I'm a little hesitant about doing a lot from an app standpoint, is just because, you use the app, or you just stop using the app because you have so many apps. But then, once you end your session to be calm, you are thrown into a spiral of notifications, emails, texts, all that stuff that's just throwing your brain for a whirlwind of stuff.
Dude, I spent 5 days out in the desert last November, and it was me and 50 some other men doing Kundalini yoga, meditation, breath work, ice baths, just the gamut of work. But we were in the middle of the desert, couldn't use our phones. There was no chance. And after 5 days of doing all of that grounding work, and then feeling so connected, leaving and then driving into town, as you start to see civilization a little bit, and then you finally, like, for me, I was like, I don't know about turning this phone on, but then I turn it on, and it was just the strangest feeling to experience my phone from 5 days of disconnection from that, and fully connecting to myself and to consciousness, to Mother Nature. So I could see, and I felt myself getting pulled into it. And I hadn't thought about that idea of how an app, could also be counterproductive to the process of meditation if we're not utilizing, the do not disturb or airplane mode or things like that, and being very conscious about our reentry, let's say, into our life after doing it.
Right. If you haven't read The Hacking of the American Mind by Robert Lustig or Irresistible by Adam Alter, both phenomenal books. The Hacking of the American Mind goes into the physiology of dopamine hits, cortisol, of basically what a lot of it is focusing on sugar and how that affects our bodies. He digs into technology as well. Irresistible, it's been a little while since I've read it, but it's another great book about how we are just becoming this drone society. We are completely addicted to our devices. Both great books.
Awesome. Yeah, I have Irresistible. I haven't read that one yet, but I will check out the other one as well. I'll throw in a couple if we're going to add to the cell phone train here.
Yes.
Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport is a really good one. I read that one last year after taking a 5-month break from social. That's a really good book of just outlining a plan of being better about your devices and usage of it, and mindfulness of using it. So that's a good one. There's one I read a little while ago. I forget who the author's name was, but it was How to Break Up with Your Phone. A little bit more of a funny take on it, but there's a lot of really good information in the beginning about, like what you were talking about, Trey, about dopamine, cortisol, those types of things that our brain releases whenever we get an alert on our phone. We see a bright, colorful picture that pops up. It's like, right. Oh, cool. We get a little hit of dopamine, then it's bad news. Then we get cortisol. Yep. And then we jump into our phone to check our email or check the weather, and we forget to do that because we're distracted by something else. And then we're scrolling through Instagram, each picture giving us a feeling of happiness, of sadness, of anger. It just, our emotions switching off and on and off and on. Which actually, it's funny one of the pieces of advice when somebody says, how long should I meditate for starting out? I usually say no more time than a social media rabbit hole.
Which could be hours.
Which 6 hours, yeah.
And that's another thing, like that, one of the easiest things, back to your original question about helping people to find time, it's being more conscious of the time that you are currently using, because you can say, like, tomorrow I'm slammed. Right. But if you look at every single minute, if you take note of what you're doing, you'll realize that even the busiest people have a couple of minutes to do something. And rather than use those minutes to get lost in your phone and, get all disheveled by whatever you're looking at, or get carried away with whatever you are and experiencing all of those changes, just take some of that time that you would put towards some of that mindless scrolling and just put it towards like a breathing exercise. And it will be so much more effective for you in the long run for the rest of your day than just, mindlessly scrolling, forget where you are, and then scrambling to do whatever you're going to do next.
If you want to read a book about utilizing every minute to your best ability, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins will make you want to get up and run 1,000 miles. He is one of the most inspirational human beings on this planet. highly, highly recommend you check that out. This is like a dream conversation for me because I love books. I love meditation. So I don't want this to end. But Robby, I do want to ask you, I like asking all of our guests, if you had to pick one book that you've read, and it sounds like you've read a lot, which is amazing, that has changed or altered your life for the better forever, what would you say that book is?
So I touched on one. I would say Atomic Habits for one, but we already talked about that one, so that one's already been said. I will say, and this takes the conversation in a little bit of a shift, and we don't have to go too deep into it, but the book is called Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. And this is something that has been very important for me, and something that meditation has also really helped me. And as I mentioned, it spills over into your life. There are different types of meditations that are about compassion. There are different types of meditations that are about cultivating love. And that sounds really fluffy, but when you actually do them, there's a lot of resistance there. And those can actually be very challenging practices. But one of the things that I've tried to be, and this was probably about the time when the China study came out, and it was a very popular book that got people to think about more like plant-based diets. I read that, and I had made the decision to become vegetarian. So that was back in 2013. 2017, I made the choice to become vegan, and around that time, I had read Eating Animals by Jonathan Safran Foer. And the perspective that he puts, and he talks a lot about like the animal agriculture industry. He talks a lot about where our food comes from, and it also shifts your perspective a little bit on it. It just affirmed everything that I was doing. And after I read that book, I said, I can no longer, make some of these choices that I've been making. I can no longer continue to, enjoy the whole ignorance is bliss mentality, which is also something that meditation teaches you. If there's something there, you look for it, you face it head on. You don't, shy away from it, because it's just going to be there egging you on. It's going to start impacting you. And for me, and the choices of food that I eat, this book was really just the tipping point of just, wow, like I can no longer, make this types of decisions I make and pretend like I'm not knowing what's going on and where people are getting their food. And I started thinking about animals in a completely different perspective from, my relationship with them, and, just the fact that they're just basically having compassion for all living beings has been, I would say that's one of my important ones for sure.
I will check that out. That's not something I've ever considered adding to my life before, but it's certainly something I'm open to. I'm open to it. I really am.
That's definitely a much harder sell than meditation. I will say that, but
yeah,
I learned early on that nobody wants to hear about that. So, there are some things in life that people just have to come to on their own.
Yeah.
And the more that you try to preach or whatever, it pushes people further away. So that's something that, I learned early on, but that was just I would say from a life-changing perspective, that was something. And I don't know if it was the book itself or if it's where I was in my life, but I just remember reading that and just things started shifting and making sense. And I'm like, all right, I've got to do X, Y, and Z. Like it was just a huge shift for me. So maybe the timing, but also just a really good book. He's an awesome author in general.
Well, you're selling it, so I will pick it up. I do intend to read that. Well, Robby, Ernie, do you have any other questions for Robby before we wrap up?
No, I don't have any questions, man. Just some gratitude. I appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I really hope that this conversation might be an exposure for somebody that is on the fence with meditation, or somebody who has fallen off the wagon with meditation, and it entices them to jump back in or jump on the wagon in the first place. In the end, it really comes down to believing that peace, some level of peace, more than we might experience now, is possible, and surrounding ourselves with things and people and resources that remind us that it's possible when it may not feel like it is, rather than isolating ourselves. And so, coaching, joining a group, they can be invaluable for people to take on this new adventure of finding more levels of peace in their life, more levels of connection and love. And that's what Robby's doing. And we appreciate it, man. And I hope some people, find value in this conversation, but also consider how beneficial joining a program with you, or even some of the resources you shared, can be for their lives.
Yes, extreme gratitude. Thank you again. And Robby, before we go, do you want to let everybody know how they can reach out to you, how they can find you online, and what resources they can get from you?
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into that, I just want to say thank you guys for having me. This is really great what you're doing, bringing people on, getting this exposure, and even just having this conversation. This has been definitely the highlight of my week for sure, and I'm sure for the rest of the week. So thank you guys so much.
It's good to hear. Yeah,
that means a lot.
You're
Thank
welcome. Yeah, man.
I would say if you want to find me, I try to find a good balance of being on social. So my main avenue is Instagram. So you can find me. It's just at TuneInward, all one word. And then you can also find me at it's just tuneinward.com. So that's where I'm starting to write more, starting to release something like audio blogs and some guided meditations on Instagram TV. So anywhere on my site or Instagram are probably the best way to get a hold of me.
Beautiful. Again, Robby, thank you so much. I don't imagine this is the last time we talk to you, so I'm really looking forward to subsequent conversations. But again, thank you again.
Yeah, and it's been 10 years, but let's meet up for a non-drink sometime.
Let's do
all
it.
Of us.
Ernie can sit in his corner drinking his beer. You and I can just hang out being the cool kids.
Some
Awesome.
Ken Euphorics. Grab a case of those.
Perfect. All right. Thank you again. Be well, guys.
Hey, thanks, guys.
One more time, I'd like to thank Robby for joining us. Seriously, check out TuneInward on Instagram. Check out his website, tuneinward.com. And stay tuned tomorrow for our very first collaboration with Robby, where he will be releasing a meditation specifically for you, our listener. You can check that out at onemosaic.life, or as a reminder, this episode of the podcast was brought to you by the Mosaic Life Circle. Sign up for the circle at onemosaic.life so you can be notified when that brand new meditation from Robby and Tune Inward come out. Couple last things. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at One Mosaic Life so you can see some of the exclusive content that we are putting out. Ernie launched our brand new Full Circle Instagram television channel last week, where he talked with Lisa Bond. She was our very first guest on this podcast, and they dug into some of the content that we discussed in episode 11 and really expanded upon that. It was a great conversation between the two of them, and we very much look forward to doing more with all of our other guests as they come on. Last but not least, if you could do us a huge favor and leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, that would go a long way in helping others discover us, others like you who are trying to improve their lives, better their chances at accomplishing their goals. Again, thank you so much for listening, for spending over an hour with us. And be sure to check out Robby Herbst and the Tune Inward meditation on onemosaic.life tomorrow when it hits the airwaves, the internet, whatever you want to call it. Thank you all. Be well.